I was asked yesterday at what time the conference starts. I said we have registration at 9 and then we start at 9:15. So he said to me, that means you start at 10. I said, no, 9:15. I know it is a losing battle, but we try as much as we can to respect the time. So with that, I want to start the second session, second and last session, which is different, as you will see, from the first one. This is a session where I asked my colleagues who were not participant in the Camp David meeting to profit from the time that has elapsed, the 40 years, and ponder, think over. I know among the participants, Bill Quant, for instance, is actually one of the few people who was a participant. He is also an academic. But my two colleagues here and myself, we are just observers of the event. And I want to start by a quotation from Jimmy Carter. Again, Jimmy Carter, in his Keeping Faith. I think that was the title, Keeping Faith. التمسك بالإيمان. And he says, towards the end of his memoirs, looking back on the 4 years of my presidency, I realize I spent more of my time working for possible solutions to the riddle of Middle East peace than on any other international problem. His 4 years were dominated by the Middle East. That's according to him. And the peak of these 4 years was certainly Camp David, the most important achievement of the period. Looking back after 40 years, I mean, the participants were answering some questions about what they intended, and what was achieved was different from the intention. Bill Quant started by saying the basis of Camp David and Carter was the antithesis of Kissinger's step by step. We have competing theories and views about Camp David. I go again to Carter. You remember at the beginning of our conference, I quoted the excitement, his speech at the Congress, and his wife actually bursting into tears about the success. The letter he sent us, in his second paragraph, he has a different view. Disappointment, regret. I don't know if it is a sense of guilt, but let me tell you what he says. The accords included the bilateral understanding between Egypt and Israel, but also a framework for resolving, and he quotes, the Palestinian problem in all its aspects. Then he adds, I always believed that the Palestinian issue was fundamental to achieving a comprehensive peace in the region. At times, I have been optimistic that peace between Israelis and the Palestinians was within their grasp. But sadly, the situation today makes optimism very difficult. Israeli settlements, he doesn't give us data, but certainly they have increased Israeli settlements in the West Bank have expanded substantially. Palestinians have fundamental difficulties and differences among themselves, and Israel's democracy is increasingly undermined by the weight of occupation. That, I think, a huge condemnation of Camp David as such, or at least the hopes of Camp David. And this is why, differently from many other conferences, I thought, after listening to the participants, after having the inside view, we get analysis, experts, people who were not directly involved, think over and ponder, after 40 years, where we are now, and possibly why, and if it is possible, to improve the situation. And I'll start with my colleague, Basma Kodmani. Basma has her PhD from the famous Sciences Po in Paris. This is where she lives now and contributes. And the first time I actually met Basma, she was working with the Institute of International Relations in Paris and was associated very much with CERI, Centre de Relations Internationales à Paris. But Basma is not the pure academic. She has been involved in the Syrian question ages ago, and she is now, let me just quote, a founding member of Global Syria, a civil society initiative launched by the Syrian diaspora in 2018. She is not going to talk about Syria now, she is going to talk about Camp David and the regional impact. Basma?
Thank you very much, and it is a real pleasure, a genuine pleasure to be here and among key witnesses and key players, as well as friends. So I'm very happy and honored to follow the first session with what I have to say at my age, or the age I was when Camp David took place, and reflect as a scholar with you on the actual implications of Camp David and where I feel we are 40 years later. You know, we scholars like to indulge in telling stories from conversations with taxi drivers, but I want to tell one because this one is really telling in order to begin my presentation, because it occurred only 2 days ago when I was in Beirut in a cab as we listened to the news on the radio about an Israeli attack near Damascus airport. The target was not clear, and my driver was very agitated. And he said, the Syrian regime allows this to happen over and over again because it doesn't respond to those repeated air raids, these repeated provocations on its territory over the years. So, of course, Israel continues. If it had happened here in Lebanon, the Israelis would receive a shower of missiles on their territory. He meant, clearly, in his own words, that there was now a deterrence factor in the equation again, one that had been lost after Camp David and set again by Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran behind it. And I found this quite interesting. Whether he was from the Shia community or a pro-Hezbollah himself was not that important, what came back and seemed as alive as 40 years ago was the need, the necessity for the Arab world to maintain an offensive posture vis-à-vis Israel. The Syrian regime had led the rejection and steadfastness front against Camp David, and most of the Arab world, certainly Arab public opinion back then, was unanimously supportive of this stance. My own perception and my personal experience with Sadat's visit to Jerusalem is the following, and I think it reflects part of what the Arab world felt in my own family context and my own perception as a young adolescent. I was watching the pictures of the visit and Sadat getting off the plane in Tel Aviv, and I thought, now this is a statesman, yes, but he's absolutely out of his mind. He lost it. That was the feeling, and it was a very deep feeling, that he had committed the unthinkable, that he had gone between a dream or, in a more negative approach, a hubris by which he wanted to be a key figure in history, never mind what that meant and what the implications were. If we recall back the narrative a little bit, and briefly, because if you open Google and Wikipedia, you'll find everything. I don't want to go into the descriptive aspect of what happened. But let's just remember that back then, Sadat was very keen to have the support of Syria, if possible. Syria as the main partner in the war in 1973. So he did visit Damascus, and he talked to Hafiz al-Assad. But Assad back then, if many of you will remember this, that Assad gave very ambiguous answers. He never said clearly, this is a red line, do not cross it, we will cut relations and go as far as he actually went afterwards. He waited until Sadat signed Camp David, or achieved, in fact, the actual negotiations and the signing of the Camp David agreement before he decided to mobilize fully and build what was called the Steadfastness and Confrontation Front, الصمود جبهة الصمود والتصدي. He rallied Libya, Iraq, Algeria, South Yemen back then, and the PLO, of course. By doing that, he was, in his own view, the new leader of the Arab world. He could recuperate what we scholars call the symbolic capital, symbolic capital. Nasserism was now an orphan, needed a new hero. Pan-Arabism all came under the umbrella of Baathism in the Syrian way. The Palestinian issue became a card in the hands of Assad. That is how he perceived it. That is how he behaved over the years, actually before Camp David and after. The competition for regional leadership became very intense. Iraq, as well, saw a vacuum to fill. And the rivalry between Syria and Iraq was ferocious. Some of you will remember that there was the rapprochement, and then a few months later, a total break of relations, accusations, mutual accusations of coup attempts against each other, and so on. So obviously that front was not a front, and the relations between the countries were not the type that could lead to any form of cooperation that would have rebuilt an Arab front against Israel. 40 years later, even though the Arab world is in shambles, and some of those countries who mobilized back then against against Sadat's decision, today are collapsing, and including, and most importantly, Syria. And the need to deter Israel continues to be a strong belief of many in the region. From this, they draw all the implications which became a lens through which all developments came after Camp David. And that continues to define a lot of the analysis. And I would say, being familiar with public opinion in Syria, which genuinely believes that everything, most of what happened was a result of Camp David, and some who actually play on this card to recuperate public opinion. There are very good reasons for that, as we see that Israel moves further to the right at a time when it has no reason to fear the military power of any country of the region. There is no strategic threat and no organized protest today of a scale that deserves that really triggers genuine concern and genuine anxiety in Israel. Actually, those acts hardly cause an emergency meeting of the Israeli government. And yet, Israel becomes more intransigent, and public opinion in Israel has moved further and further to the right. That is not a result of Camp David, but the response to that has become, is seen as a remote result of Camp David. The fact is that the decision of Egypt back then to give priority to its national interest was totally unacceptable for other countries. And Sadat himself knew very well that this move was going to deeply affect the future of the Palestinian question and the national interest of his Arab neighbors. Now, I want to reflect on, in a few words, because it is very difficult to go very deep into some issues, but maybe a number of reflections that I will put forward for discussion. The actual legitimacy of choosing national interest over Arab regional interest, Arab regional interests in general, and at the expense of other Arabs, and especially Palestinians, was the issue. Is it legitimate? Has he totally lost legitimacy as an Arab leader? And I think that continues to weigh very heavily. I remember myself writing in '81, after Sadat was assassinated, an article which said, in French, and it said, the predictable disappearance or killing of Anwar Sadat. For us, it was a matter of time. Somebody would come and punish this man. And I must say that there was indeed a regional security order in which the defense posture of other countries, maybe save the Gulf countries, was organized, and the policies of those countries was defined in a posture of possible confrontation with Israel. But let us remember, if Egypt abandoned the Palestinians, and the '82 invasion of Lebanon by Israel was made possible by Camp David, that the settlements in the Palestinian territories accelerated, But the fact is that Jordan, as well as Syria, had crushed the Palestinians a few years before Camp David. Black September had occurred in 1970. And most shockingly, in 1976, the Syrian army had surrounded and besieged the Palestinian camp of Tel Zatar in Lebanon, letting Palestinians die of thirst, literally die of thirst. So I believe this is something that we should not put aside or exclude from our equation. I think Egypt did uncover a hypocrisy back then. That is what Sadat contributed in doing. Arab governments, in fact, could never have fought Israel effectively if they ever had such an intention, because it became clear back then already, but especially since 2011, after the uprisings in many countries, that those regimes, those political systems were organized not to counter Israel, but to counter the risks emanating from their own citizens. Assad, at the beginning of 2011, had those words to those visiting him and trying to convince him to deal with the uprising through with political measures and reforms. Some telling him, your regime is under threat. This is a very serious movement. It's a wave across the whole region. And Assad's answer was, Israel does not want a change of regime in Syria. I have those assurances. And I quote somebody who was sitting in the room, not some assumption or accusation. So can we say that Camp David made other peace agreements impossible or less advantageous or led on less advantageous terms for Jordan? Jordan was fairly satisfied with the withdrawal or with the territorial arrangements that were made. And let us also mention that in 2010, Assad was actually negotiating with Israel secretly, with some American mediation as well, for the return of the Golan Heights and a peace agreement with Israel. I personally don't find that shameful. If the Golan was going to be recovered and go back under Syrian sovereignty, then that would have been an honorable deal. But those negotiations were interrupted by the uprising in 2011. And as I said, the regime was organized to crush its own population, never really in a posture to confront Israel. So what is today the incentive for Israel? I think it is hard to say that there is any incentive to give back any territory to Syria or to make what is needed in terms of concessions on the Palestinian side and slow down or freeze those settlements when President Carter asked Menachem Begin to do so. Maybe the Israelis are concerned about Iran and Hezbollah, and that is why they were keen to have a deal with Assad in 2010? Possibly. Possibly. I think Israel was genuinely and continues to be keen to see Iran pushed out of this region. Is Iran really in a position or is its intention to provide a deterrent again, in some strategic equation in the region? Again, I will say very clearly today, Iran's behavior on the ground, whether in Iraq or in Syria, has nothing to do with Israel. Nothing. And this is about a sectarian design, and certainly not something that could one day set the equation again against Israel, if one assumes and believes that it is through a balance of force and deterrence that you can reach peace or reach some decent arrangement with Israel. I think the following generation, maybe not mine, I'm the transition generation, the one that was too young to be part of Camp David in any way, but too old to integrate fully the consequences of that. The means have changed. Societies are, I think, today awake and are looking to new means to delegitimize not just their governments, but also to undermine what Israel has done in the name of security over all those years and through the use of force. The Palestinians had and continue to enjoy the deep sympathy and support of Arab societies, definitely, but one can say in all honesty that they never had allies among the governments of the Arab world. I will conclude in 2 words to say the following. How can one reflect today on what that means for peace arrangements in general, for peace negotiations in general? I would say we should first salute the role of scholars in Camp David. When Bill Quant was talking earlier this morning, he was saying we, but he had of course, a decisive role in writing those texts, in making the substance of the agreement available, in drafting, because scholars look at what is feasible. They look at where they can find points of reconciliation of positions. Politicians have a totally different set of considerations. They will worry about their own survival politically. And that also has a very powerful impact on their behavior. I think all peace negotiations are inevitably perceived, or not the negotiations themselves, but the outcomes are perceived as most often disgraceful, shameful, unthinkable, unacceptable deals, because key concessions need to be made and are made, and public opinion inevitably has a sense of loss. And what is born out of these deals is a newborn who looks abnormal, who looks disabled, and who is, on top of that, going to grow up as a handicapped living being. And that is what Camp David continued to be in the eyes of all the region, of all public opinions. I think there is no political future for those who negotiate. Unlike what one would think, they are never heroes in their own time. Maybe one exception, South Africa, maybe Mandela, yes. And yet, as we know, he was under huge pressure and opposition. The high price that is to be paid and the newborn that is the peace deal is a handicapped child, as I said. But not only that, that child needs to grow up without its parents. It's an orphan. And that was the case for Camp David. And I think that is very often the case, that those arrangements, those deals, which are so imperfect, are a source of resentment and rejection of those who negotiated. So it also makes peace negotiations more difficult because it is negotiated by politicians who have ambitions for the future. And perhaps that leaves still space for scholars to come in. They can't do everything, but they can certainly provide the substance for, to make peace negotiations and peace deals possible. I want to end on this note and say that if Arab societies are to look again into the Palestinian issue more actively and be involved more actively, we are going to probably see a very different set of strategies, which I deeply believe today is needed and is likely to represent much more of a threat to Israel, not to its actual hard security, but to the cohesion and the future and the identity of a state that wants to perceive itself as a homeland for a Jewish community. This is under threat if it is challenged the way it is starting to be challenged by Palestinians inside Palestine. I will just quote those kites or fiery kites that Palestinians from Gaza throw into the air towards Israel, and these kites fall and burn the land and the crops of Israeli peasants, Israeli cultivators. And that makes Israel very nervous and angry that it doesn't know how to respond to these kinds of challenges. So I will leave it at that, and maybe we should have had someone even younger than us. We're not that young, but a young person would have maybe told us a different story. Thank you.
Lots of young people among the audience, so hopefully they will come with their questions to complement the picture. The essence of Basma's presentation is the rejection front. The Arab world has reacted very negatively to Camp David. We can safely say that. Whatever the motivation, and I think Dr. Nabil Arabi has in his memoirs some comments on that. We can come back to them. But two pieces of data. When Sadat went to Damascus after his visit, some members of the Ba'ath party didn't want him to leave Damascus. They actually wanted not only to detain him, but to kill him. Number two, when Sadat went on the visit to Jerusalem, which coincided with Eid al-Adha, the Grand Bayram, the King of Saudi Arabia said something that is very noticeable. He said, usually during the Eid, you wish people best wishes. This time, it is different. I wish Sadat's plane crashes before he reaches Jerusalem. So that is the measure of Arab reaction to Sadat's peace initiative, Camp David, and the rest. We will now move to the international level, and I have an equally excellent colleague to comment. Dr. Shibley Telhami, who actually did his PhD thesis on Camp David. Fascinating piece of work about the bargaining process within Camp David. Huge details. I think any participant in Camp David could read that even now with a lot of benefit. He is at present the Anwar Sadat chair and the professor for peace and development. Like many good scholars, published few bestseller books. The list is long. He also seems to be a good teacher because he has awards for his teaching. Most important thing, he is one of the people who crosses between scholarship and policymaking, almost like William Quandt. He has been an advisor to all American administrations in the last 15 or 20 years. With that then, I'll give him the floor to reflect on the international impact.
Well, thank you so much, Bahgat. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for organizing this meeting. It's always a pleasure to be a guest of the American University in Cairo and to be in Cairo. So I'm happy to be here. What I'd like to do is just reflect a little bit on the strategic environment in the context of which Camp David took place. I know we focus a lot on personalities. They matter a lot, and we know they do. Sadat was not Nasser, Mubarak wasn't Sadat, and certainly Carter isn't Trump, and all of that matters, undoubtedly. But there is a strategic environment, ultimately, that leads to leaders to constrains at a minimum the options available to leaders. And that strategic environment is very important to keep in mind, both at the time of Camp David and where we are now. So if you look at when you talk about the consequences of Camp David and what's happened since Camp David, you have to put this in this historical perspective. So let me just give a few elements of the strategic picture when Sadat undertook his initiative. The first to note is the Israeli side, of course. Israelis have always wanted a bilateral treaty with Egypt. This has actually been part of their strategic priorities since 1948, articulated often from that period for a very simple reason, that Egypt was seen to be as the most powerful Arab state, and if it is taken out of the equation of the Arab world, Israel will have a freer hand elsewhere. So as a priority for Israel, it was an Israeli policy focused on opportunities to clinch a bilateral deal with Egypt. In fact, you can even look at it in the context of the Israelis wanting to hold Egyptian land to make the issue between the two of them bilateral over something other than Palestine, other than the Arab world. And in 1956, when Israel, in collaboration with Britain and France, invaded Egypt, and Eisenhower insisted on full withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Sinai, the Israelis worked very hard diplomatically to persuade Eisenhower to let them keep a piece of Egyptian territory in order to be able to negotiate a separate deal with the Egyptians. So obviously 67 provided an extraordinary opportunity for the Israelis holding Egyptian land, which transformed the nature of the relationship between Egypt and Israel. Yes, it became more than just about Palestinian Arabs, because it was now about regaining territory that is Egyptian and claim, and obviously also with it, the economy, since it jeopardized the Egyptian economy, the occupation. So from the Israeli point of view, there's nothing surprising, obviously, about the Israeli wanting to deal with Sadat once that opportunity emerged, given their long strategic picture. Nonetheless, there was an Israeli concern, as expressed by Bill Quandt, that has to do with the global strategic environment. And here we have to remember that this was still the Cold War. This was still an era of competition between the Soviet Union and the United States. And that particular competition between the two gave Egypt a relative advantage and relative leverage in the negotiations. Why? Because the United States coveted a strategic relationship with Egypt, the most powerful and important Arab state, at the expense of the Soviet Union. That gave the U.S. an interest that is separate from its interest in Israel or interest in the Arab-Israeli conflict per se. It gave Egypt certain advantages in the relationship with Israel. In fact, to the point that, as Quant mentioned, the Israelis were actually concerned that American interest and Egyptian interests coincided far more than Israeli interest and American interest, in the sense that the view of the American administration and the benefits that would accrue through consolidation of strategic relationship between Egypt and the U.S. would come at the expense of the Israeli American relationship. In fact, this had been expressed. Ezer Weizmann, the former defense minister who was at Camp David, wrote that on the eve of Camp David, he warned that the American interest coincided more with Egypt's interest, and therefore he was worried about the kind of conspiracy that Israel would be cornered going into Camp David. In fact, at Camp David, the interesting thing is that, of course, everybody wanted their own kind of deal. Egypt wanted a particular deal, the Israelis wanted a particular deal with each other, but above all, neither one side wanted to go home having lost on the strategic competition for the United States. That is, Sadat could have come home if without an agreement with Israel, if it entailed that out of that he would have come home with a stronger strategic relationship with the U.S. at the expense of Israel. And it could be argued the same thing about Menachem Begin. He wanted first and foremost to protect his relationship with the United States. Now, it's sure, Begin may have still gone home a failure. He would have had a support from his base. They would have applauded him for not compromising. But if in fact that came at the cost of Egyptian American relations being the primary strategic relationship in the Middle East, I think it was too high a price for him to pay. And in fact, this is one thing that Carter understood in the negotiations. Carter used this to threaten both Begin and Sadat about who would pay a price and who would be blamed if there was failure. He used this tactically to pressure the parties to make compromises. So it's important to keep this Soviet in the background factor, that is the Cold War factor, as a strategic weight that we take for granted and we don't reflect on. And I say that for two reasons. One reason is, let's consider for a moment the possibility that Egypt and Israel did not conclude an agreement. And then we drag on for another decade, and maybe with some minor war. I don't think real full all-out war was likely after the 73 war and disengagement agreements, but let's assume that something along that line was possible. Wait a decade and the Soviet Union collapses. The Soviet Union collapses. The strategic environment completely changes. And the leverage that Egypt had in the context of the Cold War would have been diminished at a minimum. Now, I'm not saying that would have happened. It's too many things are moving parts, but just to put that in perspective. The other perspective, I would say, is fast forward to 2000. 2000, that is the second Camp David. That is when Bill Clinton brought Israeli and Palestinian leaders for a different kind of session. Now, mind you, the Palestinians are not Egypt. They don't have the regional leverage that Egypt had separately, so there was that inequality of power. But at the global level, because there was no global context at all to speak of, it was American hegemony. This is an era of American dominance following the Cold War. It was exactly the opposite of what was anticipated at Camp David I, where Egypt and the U.S. are more on the one side, and then Israel, a little bit feeling insecure about the context, where here you have complete collaboration between Clinton and the Israeli prime minister. And Arafat didn't even want to go to Camp David because he said, if I go there, you're going to corner me, and and in fact, he needed an assurance that he wouldn't be blamed if there was failure, because he was afraid that they will try to impose something on him, he will reject it, they'll blame him, he'll pay a price. He got an assurance, by the way, that he wouldn't be blamed from Bill Clinton, but he was still blamed after the failure. That's the context, to keep in mind this changed strategic environment at the global level that had consequences for what happened in terms of leverage at Camp David, and how that has been transformed afterwards. The second question that I want to relate to, particularly during that period for Egypt, and we take that for granted, this was also an opportune moment of leverage for Egypt regionally. And the reason for it is very straightforward. It's separate from the Soviet Union and the Cold War. Obviously, we're talking about just a few years after the '73 war. We're talking about Sadat goes to Jerusalem in '77, 4 years after the 1973 war, which was a war that Arabs, both Egypt and Syria, demonstrated an enormous capacity to the surprise of the world, and certainly first and foremost to the surprise of the Israelis, the kind of things the Israelis were worried about that Egypt could bring to bear through the weight of its military. And it brought the urgency in a way that they need to find a way to have peace with Israel. Yeah, there had been the disengagement agreements that have reduced the chance of war right after '73, but the memory of '73, the memory, and I would say the negative memory from the Israeli point of view, because they looked at possibly losing in the first couple of weeks of that war. So that memory, that weight of memory was still there as leverage. And then add to that the consequences of that war, particularly the Arab oil embargo, that had added significant weight to Egypt's side of the equation. But at the same time, I want to point out to something that we often forget. It's not something new, but we often forget, because we think of this as the pinnacle of Egypt's leadership in the Arab world in some ways. Yes, Nasser was the pinnacle, spiritually, if you wish, of leadership in the Arab world. But after '67, and before Nasser ultimately died in 1970, there was already a diminished importance of Egypt in the Arab world and Pan-Arabism. But what you've had with '73, obviously, there was an empowered Arab sense, because there was a coalition between the oil embargo, the coordination of Syria and Egypt, the support, economic and more than economic support for the war from Algeria and Saudi Arabia, the clout that the Arabs put on the table at the UN immediately after. There was a sense that the Arabs had more weight on the international system than they've ever had before. Really, I would say ever had before, and almost collectively, because you had a lot of players in the field. And that's when, of course, the PLO gets declared as the sole representative of the Palestinian people in Morocco, and then taken to the UN. All of that is part of the clout. But at the same time, there was a creeping reality that the weight of influence in the Arab world was shifting to the Gulf. And let's not forget that preceded Camp David. What I mean by it, Sadat had talked about it before. Egypt fought 4 wars, 48, 56, 67, 73. Those are the major wars. I'm not even counting things like the war of attrition. And lost lots of lives, devastation of economy in ways that none of the Gulf states ever paid a price for the Palestinian issue. And yes, that was the claim to leadership. The claim to leadership is we are the only Arab country that are capable of fighting a successful war against Israel. That is what you pay. That is the ticket to Arab leadership. But what was happening is that here you fight the '73 war, and on the back of the '73 war, an oil embargo is imposed, and the consequence of which the oil prices go up 4 times. So who's benefiting suddenly all the oil-producing countries are far richer than they were. And then, obviously, Egypt becomes somewhat more dependent on the aid from the Gulf states, who were presenting conditions, whose money wasn't always coming as promised. So in some ways, that the claim to leadership through the military made Egypt somewhat more dependent increasingly in the Arab world as the rich Gulf states became richer in the late 1970s. And with that, if you look and see what happened, particularly after Camp David, we know obviously what Basma talked about, what others talked about. Of course, Egypt paid a heavy price for Camp David. Yes, it got every inch of its territory back, and I don't think it would have agreed to anything less than that. And maybe the aim was to get something more comprehensive than was actually achieved. But Egypt paid a huge price initially, being expelled from the Arab League and losing its leadership role in the Arab world. The shift that happened after that, though, wasn't really with Syria. I mean, the truth of the matter is the big competition, the party that saw itself as the replacement of Egyptian leadership in the Arab world was Iraq and ambitious Saddam Hussein. And I think you can argue that Saddam Hussein's initiative ultimately with the Iran-Iraq war and rallying the Gulf states behind him as sort of defendant of Arab interests in the Gulf may have been part of the shift in Arab politics, with Saddam Hussein wanting to assert himself as a leader of the Arab world after Egypt's peace agreement with Israel. And so, in that sense, I think you can argue that it's not only that Egypt was no longer seen as the leader of the Arab world and is being marginalized in the Arab world, it affected Arab politics even separate from Palestine and the 1982 Lebanese war, which was extraordinarily important, obviously. I'm not sure that the Israelis would have undertaken that war without the peace treaty with Egypt, and that's important. But I think it has affected the way Arab politics were defined and shifted to the Gulf. And with that shift to the Gulf, coupled with the 82 war, you know what happened with the Palestinians. They felt totally ignored because of the shift between the neutralization of this and the shift to the Gulf. The 1987 Palestinian Intifada rises with essentially Palestinians relying on themselves. Let me end just with a couple of things about what happened, since I already made some reflections on the changed strategic environment, had it affected American priorities. I would say that if you reflect particularly on the three countries that were parties to, or at least participated in the Camp David negotiations, the US, Egypt, and Israel, you would have to say that given the vision that existed about strategic competition between Egypt and Israel for alliance with the United States, that era is gone. Because, in fact, except for a brief period of time, the Egyptian US relationship not only never competed with the Israeli US relationship, but over time, it became more of a subsidiary of that relationship. It became a triangular relationship much more than just a bilateral relationship. And I would say the strategic US-Israeli relationship has become much stronger over time. So much stronger that it is interesting to watch what is happening in the negotiations now, and I'll end with that. If we reflect on the American role in negotiations, particularly pertaining to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Of course, It's never been the case that the U.S. Was ever even-handed in that negotiation. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who's ever claimed that the U.S. is even-handed. I think the question is, honest broker is more like it, meaning you're really trying to make a deal, and you can take, if you want to make a deal, you need to think about the interests of both sides, particularly in terms of stability. The U.S. has always had interests beyond Israel itself that it had to take care of. And sometimes there were moral considerations, depending on the president, who were more sensitive to the Palestinians. But by and large, there's never been, even during Oslo, when we think of the Oslo agreements as something that the U.S. played a role in, we have to remember that Bill Clinton, didn't really play a role in those negotiations. It was ultimately the Israelis making a deal with the PLO, and then asking Clinton to host them. So the Palestinians came to the White House through Israel, and ultimately left the White House through Israel. I mean, it was always been triangular. But even with that, there was a sense that the U.S. had interest in the region to protect, and there was sensitivity to the other side. What we see now is really something extraordinary, something we had never seen before under Trump. And it's not about being biased or being not even-handed, because as I said, that's always been the case. It is more to think about it like this. Historically, Arabs have wanted every American administration, quote, to play an active role in negotiations. In fact, Sadat used to say 99% of the cards were in the hands of the U.S. And the Arabs, when they think we need the U.S. to play an active role, they think that if they play an active role, they're going to put pressure on Israel. Well, what we see now is exactly the opposite. So Arabs finally are getting an active American role at a time when nobody expecting an active American role. Arabs are getting an administration that went against the advice of experts and said, no, we're going to try to do Palestinian-Israeli peace, except for one thing. Essentially implementing what appears to be an extremist agenda that is completely one-sided in the name of realism, as Bill Quant had mentioned about sort of like, isn't there asymmetry of power that is one-sided? So let's make that the guide to our negotiating agreement. That's where we are. I wouldn't blame that on Camp David per se. I'm not sure what would have happened if there was no Camp David. I wouldn't say that if there was no Camp David, it would have been a lot better. That is something for history to decide. Egypt did get every inch of its territory back. That's not something small. Egypt did avoid major wars that could have been devastating. And we need to keep that in mind when we look at the bigger picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shibley. Very interesting argument. Basma says, Arab world, Egypt defected. Almost a traitor. It has to be condemned. Shibley, through the international analysis, introduces a very interesting argument. And I would like both Quant and Dr. Al-Arabi to intervene about this point. Egypt had a leverage in Camp David that was not used. The Cold War and the effect of the October War. Remember, when Sadat dismissed Soviet advisors in 1972, Kissinger said, if he had just told me, he could have asked for anything. That is the Cold War impact of Egypt. Why these two aspects of leverage were not used? I think that opens the discussion. So, two different arguments, critical of Egypt, but in different ways. But in a sense, Dr. Telhami comes and says, was Camp David too bad? We don't know. What would have been the situation if Camp David didn't happen? So with that, I'll open the discussion, and I'll take 2-3 questions, and then for a first round, and come for a second round, and please introduce yourself when you talk.
Which are very exciting and interesting. I have 2 comments on each of the presentations. The first one relates to what Basma was saying, that the problem was not Camp David, but was the divisions in the Arab world. The problem was not Camp David, but the divisions in the Arab world. You know, the persecution of the Palestinians in Jordan and in Syria, etc. Now, I would like to say that Camp David could not work for other Arab countries. You know, Camp David, if we think of it as a model, it would work only for Egypt. Because in fact, Hafez al-Assad, as you said, negotiated with the Israelis, and he said, okay, you know, complete withdrawal of territories for complete peace. And he did not get this. The Israelis insisted on keeping, you know, the southern shore of the Tiberia Lake. So it could not work in the case of Syria. And definitely it did not work in the case of the Palestinians. The Palestinians are offering the Israelis everything, complete normalization. Nevertheless, the maximum they can get, I don't know, 23% of the West Bank, but not even as a state. So I think, you know, Camp David was meant to work only for Egypt, not for other Arab countries. So this is my first point. The second point, Egypt went with a complete strategic imbalance with Israel. Economically, we had the uprising of January 1977. The Egyptian economy was weak. Secondly, no Arab support, because if Sadat wanted really to have a comprehensive peace agreement, should have at least told Arab leaders about this. They were all surprised, including his foreign minister, did not know about his intention to go to Jerusalem. So no Arab support. And in the case of the Soviet Union, he abrogated the Friendship and Defense Treaty in 1976. So no support from the Arabs, no support from the Soviet Union, with weak economy. And also the Israelis interpret what happened in 1973 as Israeli victory. They ended the war, occupying a large part of the West Bank of the Suez Canal. So, you know, what would he get? He got exactly what the balance of forces that between the 2 countries would entail. He could not get more than this. That's why I understand very well the reaction of the Arabs and the Syrians and the Saudis. They knew very well that he has nothing, you know, to bargain with, and therefore he would accept what the Israelis want. And the role of the US administration was completely, you know, passive. I don't know, I mean, you worked on the bargaining. I don't know what sort of bargaining the US intervened in favor of the Arabs. So I think it is really, it is not surprising that nobody in the Arab world is celebrating Camp David. It is a disaster seen by the Arabs as a disaster. Why? Because it is the end of any realistic attempt to reach a comprehensive peace in the Middle East.
Dr. Mona? Sorry, can I be at the end? Yeah. Because I want to question to Dr. Basma.
Thank you. My name is Imam Gharib. I got my PhD in Arab-Israeli conflict, mainly American policy towards Arab-Israeli conflict during John F. Kennedy era from 1961 to his assassination 23rd of November 1963. So start my question first to Dr. Basma. Would like to focus how do you see the role by media dealing with the Arab leaders, especially Sadat and Assad. Sadat, if you remember, exactly after Camp David, mainly the American media shows him as one of the best gentlemen all over the world. I heard, and some heard, that they tried to appear him as when God creates the earth, he got Sadat first, and here they told the media, we are so religious people, so can't publish these articles here in Egypt. Second, on the other side, on Assad, if you remember, the historians, Patrick Seal wrote Assad Sphinx of Damascus. So I think that maybe, especially concerns Sadat, it's maybe a rule for Sadat assassination in 1980. This first question. Secondly, which is the most important for Dr. Shibley, how do you see or the main question, don't you think that the Israeli lobby was behind not to complete Jimmy Carter's second term? You know that Carter already spent only one term in the office. For my point of view, as I mentioned before, he's the second U.S. president, played a very important role towards the Arab-Israeli conflict. The first one was John Kennedy. John Kennedy was the first U.S. president support the Palestinian issue. If you remember, he was a senator in 1960. He wrote a very important good book called Strategy of Peace. He was the first U.S. president to find a solution for Palestinian refugees. So during my study, I tried to prove that Israel behind of his assassination, as he tried to put a good solution for the Arab-Israeli conflict. He was trying to find a solution for Israeli nuclear weapon also. After his assassination, they find, I talk about Johnston administration, they find document that he tried to make a triangle meeting between Nasser and Iban and also Kennedy. So how do you see it? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Imam. Thank you very much.
Dr. Nabi.
You raised your hand, and I come to Dr. Nabi.
السلام عليكم، كل سنة وانتم طيبين. بس حضرتك هتكلم معاك بالعربي حضرتك. ممكن؟ عربي بالعربي. ايوه. حضرتك دلوقتي بعد 40 سنة من كامب ديفيد بقت اسرائيل واحد الديمقراطية، والدول العربية تأخرت عن الديمقراطية وما رضوش بالديمقراطية. جت غت عندهم ربيع العربي تأمروا على الديمقراطية وما رضوش. كنا الديمقراطية والحرية والشفافية كان نفسنا نطبقها في الوطن العربي، حرية شفافية ديمقراطية وتداول سلمي للسلطة، كان نفسنا. لكن دلوقتي إسرائيل بقت واحد الديمقراطية والوطن العربي رجع لورا. فإحنا نتمنى يعني إنه الدول العربية تلحق قطاع الديمقراطية. هي الأمان للدول العربية، هي الأمان، وهي الأمان للشباب، عشان أمل الشباب. يعني عايز توقف الهجرة والهجرة غير الشرعية، والشباب مبقاش عنده أمل. لو كنا نفذنا الديمقراطية ورضينا بيها وصبرنا عليها شوية سنة سنتين عقبال ما الناس تفهمها، كنا احنا دلوقتي في مكان تاني وحتة تانية للوطن العربي.
شكرا جزيلا. دكتور نبيل.
Thank you. I enjoyed very much the discussion. And I have been wondering for the last 40 years about the effect of Camp David and what it would have achieved. As I said at the very end of my previous intervention, Egypt submitted a full proposal containing everything, can you imagine, for the Palestinian authorities. But after 40 years, I think everyone has a conflict, everyone, because Camp David should have been well prepared. You enter into something you're not sure of. The text submitted by Egypt should have been discussed by the Americans well before. Change should have been involved. The consequences of going this way should have been presented to President Sadat, because he definitely, number one priority was to regain the territory. There is no doubt about it. He is the president of Egypt, not of anything else. But he knew about the kind of problems he will face. It would have been very easy to try to postpone Camp David, to have a preparatory meeting for Camp David, but to jump into the unknown, I think it is a very bad tactics, a very bad diplomacy.
And to give the floor first of all, yeah, we will have another round.
Thank you. I hope, Bahgat, that my presentation was clear about what I meant by the rejectionist thought. And on that aspect, it was important to pay some tribute to what an Egyptian leader decided should be the interest of his country. And that actually echoes what Nabil Arabi was saying. Camp David should have been better prepared. Yes. Was it possible? Bill Quant could answer that question. Was it possible to get a better deal if it had been better prepared? Clearly, we had a partial arrangement. We had a very imperfect, if I may say, arrangement. But it was what was possible against what was better. But maybe you think that preparation on the Arab side, on Egypt's side, could have gotten a better deal. And I think that is what you mean. And probably, if we reflect back, yes, probably there was a card that was played in a way, and that was the genuine criticism from Arabs or Arab intellectuals, let's leave the regimes on the side, was to say, well, Egypt was anyway the easiest part of the conflict, and Egypt had something absolutely major to offer that no other party could offer, and therefore it didn't bargain properly for that card that it was about to concede. Egypt in itself was a major asset, and giving that away, and I would say the one who survived is Menachem Begin. He remained in power, not the other two, because it was really a favorable agreement for Israel. Whether the Golan, and that's for Mustafa Kamel is saying, whether Assad was able to get the Golan back, I know, but this is not yet fully published, if I'm not mistaken, and so the source has not received clearance to publish that, that the discussion had reached the return, including the June 4th line, to Syria. Okay, so we were at a point where the Golan would have been agreed by Israel to return to Syrian sovereignty, and within a certain timeline, of course. Now, again, I think we need to ask very genuinely whether the Hezbollah factor was a deterrent factor, was the incentive for Israel. I hate to say that because I know that Hezbollah then turned out to be only a sectarian militia. Nevertheless, today, if Assad were to choose between conceding to Israel the departure of Iran from its territory, not against the Golan, unfortunately, he wouldn't get the Golan for that. He would just get his survival, and that's what his own incentive is today. It is not clear whether he can do that anymore. That is, he is too dependent. And back then, in 2010, he contemplated breaking relations with Iran because that's what it implied. And things fell apart, and he needed Iran when the uprising occurred. So I think that it's a very interesting, we don't have all the elements of that discussion, but it was a matter of weeks when things turned the other way. I don't know about the role of media and how it portrayed Assad. I think Sadat. Sorry, it's obvious that the media wasn't prepared, and back then there was no public diplomacy preparation. There was none of that was there. The surprise effect was Sadat's best card to play vis-a-vis Israel. And well, it turned out that it was a very costly one for his life.
Yeah, thanks. So let me address the issue of bargaining in the question. Also, it touches on Dr. Al-Arabi's point, and because that's what I wrote my book on when on Camp David. It focused on the bargaining behavior. And I think let's start with Ismail Fahmy, the late Ismail Fahmy, foreign minister, resigns. Why does he resign? I interviewed him here long ago, and also he says it in his book. He said he didn't object to Sadat wanting to negotiate with Israel. He saw that as a strategic imperative. He supported the idea. He didn't like the way Sadat negotiated. Essentially, he thought that Sadat was giving up front by going to Jerusalem all kinds of concessions without getting anything in return. So it was actually more about, in a way, focused on strategy and tactics of bargaining rather than on the big strategic shift that the Egyptian elites saw, including people in the foreign ministry who were focused on the Palestine question. Foreign ministry was always thought that, Dr. Arabi can correct me on this, but always focused on the Palestine question as being important to Egypt, regardless of the presidencies. At Camp David, when Egypt went to Camp David, what did Egypt want to get? Well, at a minimum, Egypt wanted to get every inch of its territory back. That was absolute minimum. No Egyptian President Sadat otherwise would have gone home without that. That's not possible. So that was the absolute minimum that Egypt wanted to get. Beyond that, Egypt wanted to get as much as possible on general Arab issues, especially Palestine. How much, that was open to question. That is bargaining space. That is where the negotiation is. What did the Israelis want? The Israelis want full peace treaty with Egypt because they wanted to decouple Egypt from the Arab world. And beyond that, they want to give as little as possible on anything else. They got what they wanted, and so the question is that negotiating space. Where is possible? What is possible in that negotiation space? We all can speculate because each side got its minimum. The question is, could they have gotten more? In my book, I say at least it could have been tried, that Egypt's behavior was not optimal, that Egypt could have tried more along the lines of Bill Quant's argument that on settlements, for example, it could have been possible to try more. I don't know whether there's going to be it was possible to link the two agreements, the Palestinian autonomy and the Egyptian Israeli treaty in some way or form. Certainly the two questions that were practical, that could have had an impact, would have been some more longer free zone settlements and some form of linkage to make sure that the Palestinian issue is not going to be ignored, that there could be some time, and that has not been tried. And from my point of view, that was a failure. Now, whether it's because of lack of preparation or because Anwar Sadat saw the big picture but didn't really focus on the trees, I think what I have found in interviewing, all sides in the negotiations and talking to people like Bill on this, is that it wasn't only that Carter didn't push. For example, as Bill pointed out earlier, on settlements, when it became clear that Carter's own understanding of the term of settlement freeze was different from the one Menachem Begin understood and then brought that at the very end. It's not only Carter that didn't push. Why is it going to be that Carter was going to defend the Palestinians, not the Egyptian side? The Egyptian side was not present in that conversation. In some ways, I would say, from my own assessment, that Sadat subcontracted the settlement issue to Jimmy Carter. He said, basically, I trust you. And Jimmy Carter felt overburdened by that. He said, I am first and foremost going to defend the interest of my country. And he felt overburdened by Sadat over-trusting him in some ways, because he couldn't trust himself being faithful to the Sadat trust on issues that are not going to be critical to him. So in my opinion, yes, there would have been more room for better negotiations. No guarantee for success, though. See, that's the point. I mean, I'm saying it should have been pushed, tried, probed, but doesn't mean it would have succeeded because each side got the minimum that it wanted. One question related to the Israel lobby. Now, of course, the Israel lobby is extremely powerful in the U.S. That's not, you know, that's well known in the context of lobbies. And sure, over the years, I mean, you can argue that certainly the sitting Israeli government at the time did not want Carter reelected. I mean, they were angry with him. They saw him as a threat, maybe implementing the situation. And frankly, we don't know, had Carter been reelected, whether or not it would have been possible to move more, whether if Sadat had not been assassinated and Carter had been reelected, maybe there may have been some additional room for maneuvers. Hard to know. But while there was opposition to Carter, I think it would be wrong to pin ultimate defeat of Carter on the Israel lobby. The economy was in terrible shape. The interest rates were very, very high. Typically, that's more important. Carter himself is resentful that many Jewish Americans in the Democratic Party abandoned him. Still, a majority supported him, but typically a majority of American Jews are Democrats, overwhelmingly Democrats, and you get sometimes 80, and in some cases even 90%. In his case, it dropped, I think it was like 60 to 70%. I don't remember the exact percentage of support, but some abandoned him, but not the majority obviously abandoned him. He still thinks this is an issue. Jimmy Carter mentions that every once in a while about being resentful of being abandoned because he thought he did this for Israel. He thought what he did was good for Israel. He still thinks that. Now, I want to give you a contrast just to finish that point, and the contrast is on Obama. Obama was the least favored candidate when he ran among Israelis. It was a public opinion poll across the board in Israel, even public opinion. He was the least favored candidate, Democrat or...
When he called the Palestinians to come and share in the campaign, they refused. What would you think the scenario would be if they share in the campaign with Dr. Mohamed?
Thank you. I think these were two very insightful presentations which we all enjoyed. I have two questions. One is out of two questions. One is to, I thought what you said, Dr. Korany, about Shibley's description as opposed to Basma's was that Sadat did not take advantage of many assets that he had and that he could have used. I think this is an excellent point that Shibley has underlined and that many people don't know about, but Kissinger's reflection is very telling. The other thing has nothing to do with Camp David, never mind, but I thought having Basma Kodmani here, couldn't we have 1 minute on Syria, please? Particularly that Idlib is on the table and the 3 other countries are discussing the future of Syria. Thank you.
As I said, we have the Arab panel immediately afterwards, and perhaps we started with Dr. Nabil.
I just want to say that we have to take into consideration that the preparation was by everyone, not only by the Egyptian. I admit the Egyptian delegation was not prepared. The text that we have, we did not get the approval of the president or change it if there is another point of view that he has. And the Americans really should have had 1 or 2 meetings between the 2 delegations to discuss matters. They didn't do that. In the morning we meet with the American delegation, and in the afternoon they meet with the Israelis. The next day they're different, and we don't know what's happening. Maybe matter could have been more clarified to the leaders to understand where we are. But I think the preparation was committed by everyone.
Thank you very much. I'll switch to Arabic. I'm sorry. I'll switch to Arabic now. الغداء الساعة 1:30. قبل الغداء بنبدأ دلوقتي البانل العربي دكتور نبيل لو سمحت تيجي هنا. كلنا هنبقى كل البانلست حتى بيه كمان تتكلم انجليزي معلش.
ترانزليشن عايزين ترجمه. كان لازم في ترجمه يعني. ترانزليشن
معلش كان لازم.
لحل القضيه الفلسطينيه واحبطت العمليه دي، ما رايك؟ او راي الدكتور نبيل العربي؟
ممكن ناخد الاسئله كلها يا دكتور بهجت مره واحده. We can take the questions all at once and then answer them. Would you like that? خلاص تمام. حضرتك سؤالك كان موجه بشكل عام؟ ناخد سؤال حضرتك.
I would like the panelists. هم بالانجليزي وبالعربي. بالعربي بس عشان خاطر هذا العامل الديموغرافي في الصراع. الإسرائيليين مهتمين جدا بالخطر السكاني العربي الفلسطيني. فهل هذا الاهتمام له ما يبرره ولا محاولة برضه لصرف أنظار العرب عن قضايا أخرى؟ التكاثر السكاني الفلسطيني في إسرائيل، العرب في إسرائيل، قدر التكاثر السكاني اليهودي 3 مرات. 2 الهجرة اليهودية، ما عادش فيه موارد للهجرة يهودية لإسرائيل. وده برضه أحد مصادر القلق الإسرائيلي، وده اللي خلى ترامب يقول لهم في خلال 20 سنة هيبقى رئيس قسم محمد، يعني كأنه يعني يحاول يخوف الإسرائيل أكثر ما هم خايفين. أنا عايز يعني لو كان البانلست يقدروا يخاطبوا أو يتكلموا عن هذه القضية، قضية التوازن الديموغرافي، وقد يكون هذا هو السلاح الفلسطيني السري. زيادة الموارد
باختصار عشان الوقت ضيق. يعني ما تبقى للفلسطينيين هو فعلا موضوع الفرق السكاني او التوازن السكاني مع اسرائيل، وهذا اللي ادى الى الاصرار الاسرائيلي على الهويه اليهوديه لاسرائيل، انه مهما كان عدد العرب فتبقى اسرائيل يهوديه بهويتها، ولو سكانها ما عندوش كلهم يهود او اكثر من نصهم راح يتحولوا يصيروا عرب. في عمل اسرائيلي هو الاراضي الفلسطينيه اذا ستبقى تحت سيطره اسرائيل، نحن امام فعلا اقليه يهوديه في كيان حيكون مش عربي اسرائيلي يعني عربي يهودي، وانما فعلا عربي وتبقى فيه اقليه يهوديه. هذا من فعل الحكومات الاسرائيليه المتتاليه بانه عدم اعاده الاراضي للفلسطينيين. هلا هون اعتقد في هذا المجال في تغيير حقيقي، ولكن اخذ وقت. اخر 10 سنوات هو حقيقي في استراتيجيه الفلسطينيين. يعني من كتب في الثمانينات انه خلينا بقى دوله واحده، خلي اسرائيل تضم الاراضي الفلسطينيه المحتله وخلينا نتحول لبلد واحد وحنورجيهم من الداخل حيحصل ايه فيهم، عم تتبلور على شكل سياسي الآن، ولكن لسه بدايتها. وهي آخر 10 سنوات مع تغيير النخبة السياسية الفلسطينية عم ننتقل لهذا النموذج، يعني اللي هو النموذج الجنوب أفريقي، واستراتيجيات اللي بتتبعها تأتي من كمان مستلهمة من جنوب أفريقيا. الأكبر، ولكن يتطلب استراتيجيات ما أعتقدش أنه العنف رح ينفع فيها لفترة معينة على الأقل. كمان هون النموذج الجنوب أفريقي بيعطينا دلائل أنه في مقاومة سلمية أولا، ثم ما فيش نتيجة من المقاومة السلمية أصبح في مقاومة عسكرية، ولكنها عسكرية بالمعنى يعني في المدن وسلاح خفيف وما هياش حرب يعني بالشكل الحرب. فأنا أعتقد نموذج الحرب ومواجهة إسرائيل هذا انتهى بكل تأكيد، ونقرأ نتائجه على الوضع الفلسطيني وعلى التغير في القيادة الفلسطينية. دكتورة منى، بالنسبة لإدلب أنا مش حقدر أتحدث لأنه ما هواش الموضوع، ولكن خليني أقول بكلمتين. لو شفتي الخريطة اللي صدرت عن الاتفاق الروسي التركي أمس لمنطقة إدلب الكبرى، حتشوفي منظر أنا أعتقد أنه هذا بيجمد الوضع السوري على حالة انقسام طويل الأمد مع الأسف الشديد. محزنة جدا الخريطة.
أنا عاوز أقول نقطة بالنسبة للسؤال المهم للدكتور سعد عن الناحية الديموغرافية. يعني أضيف نقطة هامة بالنسبة اللي قالته زميلتي الدكتورة بسمة. ويمكن الإعلام العربي، أنا بوجه كلام الإعلام العربي، قاصر في هذا الموضوع. القانون الأخير بالنسبة للجنسية الإسرائيلية يهدف أساساً إلى احتواء الأراضي العربية دون إعطاء الحقوق للفلسطينيين. يعني دي كانت المشكلة في إسرائيل، إن عاوزين ياخدوا الأراضي العربية ولكن يخافوا من الطوفان الديموغرافي. القانون الجنسية الأخير في شهر مايو عمل نوع من الأبارتايد، تفرقة عنصرية، بحيث بالضبط أكتر، بحيث إن ممكن يبقى عندك غالبية سكانية ولكن الأولوية للسكان اليهود. وأنا بعتقد الإعلام العربي لم يذكر هذا الموضوع. فإحساسي إن إحنا الكلام عن الناحية الديموغرافية متأخر بعض الشيء. بعد القانون الإسرائيلي الإسرائيليين حاولوا يحلوا هذا الموضوع. الأولوية للسكان اليهود، هم اللي قرروا مصير الدولة، والباقي حتى لو كان عددهم كبير غير مهم. أنا متهيألي ده توضيح أساسي.
حاضر، أنا هستأذن حضرتك بس إحنا ماشيين بدور معين.
أود أضيف كلمة في هذا الموضوع، لأنه في الواقع موضوع السلاح الديموغرافي اللي أشار له الدكتور سعد ده كان ممكن يبقى عامل مهم من 10-15 سنة. بس إحنا كمان الآن لأسباب مختلفة هذكر سبب منهم. ما ننساش إنه العالم الغربي وبالذات الولايات المتحدة عندها غالبية كبيرة من غير البيض السود، كانوا مهتمين جدا بما يحدث في جنوب افريقيا وبيساعدوا في جنوب افريقيا. هنا العكس، هنا الأغلبية أو الأقلية اليهودية اللي موجودة في إسرائيل متصلة بكل الناس ومؤثرة على كل الناس. يعني من 10-15 سنة قال لي بعض يعني كبار المفكرين الفلسطينيين احنا عندنا سلاح سري اسمه السلاح الديموغرافي، لكن الظروف كلها تغيرت، لا نستطيع ان نعتمد على هذا السلاح الان.
بعد اذن حضرتك اتفضل الاول، بس ماشيين بالدور معي. استاذ سالم.
سالم عبد الغني، صحفي. أنا بشكر الدكتورة بسمة على العرض اللي حضرتك قدمتيه جدا، وخاصة على بالنسبة للربط بين التطور 40 سنة واللي بيحصل في سوريا. عايز حضرتك بس تكلميني عن العامل حزب الله وعامل إيران، لأن الموضوع الكلام عليه عنه مثلا في وسائل الإعلام العربية كله دعائي وأيديولوجي أكتر ما هو معلوماتي وتفسيري أو تحليلي. يعني هل فعلا عامل حزب الله بعد 40 سنة من كامب ديفيد بيلعب دور في إن هو يكون مثلا يحسب لإسرائيل أو يحسب للتطور اللي موجود حاليا في الوضع ده؟ سؤال برضو للدكتور نبيل العربي. كان بديفيد 40 سنة سعادتك، وطبعا هل هناك ما يبنى عليه حاليا والتطور اللي بيوصل اللي احنا الحوار عن صفقة القرن، هل فعلا ما يبنى على كامب ديفيد شيء يقود الى اللحظه الراهنه كما بتقول المعارضه، اللي هي حتى المعارضه في مصر ان كامب ديفيد ادت الى حاجات انقسامات عربيه، مصلحه مصريه ليست مصلحه عربيه. حضرتك كنت جوه المطبخ، هل فعلا يعني كامب ديفيد قادت الى التطور السلبي او ما يتوقعه العرب سلبيا من مما يطلق عليه صفقه القرن؟
تحب حضرتك تجاوب؟ دكتور نبيل. ممكن نشغل المايك
كما ذكرت انا شخصيا اعترضت على حاجات على كامب ديفيد، لكن في الوقت نفسه لا نستطيع ان نحمل كامب ديفيد كل اللخبطه اللي حصلت بعد كده، لان كلنا عملنا اخطاء، كل الدول العربيه عملت اخطاء، والامريكان كان لازم الامريكان يرتبوا الموضوع قبل ذلك، يعني يدعوا اثنين قاده ما يعني تقابلوا مره لكن ومش متاكدين من موقف كل واحد منهم، ومش يعني اداره الموضوع كانت سيئه ما فيش شك في ذلك. لكن ان احنا نحمل كامب ديفيد كل العقوبات، لا، اول حاجه كمصريين هنا ان احنا نروح خدنا ارضنا، دي حاجه مهمه جدا يمكن ما كناش خدناها لغايه النهارده. لكن كذلك حصلت حاجات ثانيه بحسن نيه، تصورنا انه الجزء الخاص او تصور البعض الجزء الخاص بالاراضي المحتله بفلسطين الحكم الذاتي ده سوف يؤدي الى شيء، وزي ما انا قرات من نيويورك تايمز ان حتى نيويورك تايمز كان بتنتقد اسرائيل للمواقف اللي خدها بيجن والناس اللي معاه. وزير الدفاع وايزمان استقال من الحكم الذاتي من المشاركه فيه، وزير الخارجيه لا وزير الدفاع ديان استقال، ما كانوش متفقين معاه، يعني هو غير المسار، كان ممكن يبقى مسار مختلف على سوقه لكن هو غيره وما حدش توقف في هذا الموضوع، والامريكان ما قدروش يمنعوه.
حاليا بيرجعوا لمقام 73 كان بيرجعوا الفلسطينيين
اللي عند الفلسطينيين النهارده ما حصلش في الابارتايد بتاع جنوب افريقيا. في طرق في فلسطين لا يستطيع الفلسطينيين ان يمشوا فيها في الاراضي المحتله. لا يستطيع الفلسطينيين ان يمشوا فيها، ده ما حصلش في جنوب افريقيا على الرغم من الابارتايد.
بروفيسور تلهامي.
اسمحي لي بس اجاوب على الخطر الديموغرافي اللي كنت ما جاوبتش عليه، لانه انا كمان بقوم باستطلاعات راي في هذا الموضوع، ليس فقط في داخل اسرائيل ولكن ايضا في الولايات المتحده وبين اليهود في الولايات المتحده، فهناك بعض الافكار عن هذا الموضوع. اولا نحن نعرف ان هذا قضيه الخطر الديموغرافي وحتى الكلام عن الخطر الديموغرافي كانت قضيه خاطئه، مشروع سلبي التحدث عنه خاصه في الولايات المتحده. الكثير من رجال السياسه يتحدثون عن الخطر الديموغرافي، يضغطون على اسرائيل بالانسحاب، ولكن كان التركيز يجب ان يكون على القوانين الدوليه وليس الخطر الديموغرافي. الحديث عن الخطر الديموغرافي انتج خطر ديموغرافي داخلي غير متوقع، فالتغيير الذي حصل بشكل أكبر حصل على مستوى اليهود في إسرائيل أكبر من على مستوى العرب والفلسطينيين في الأراضي الفلسطينية المحتلة. فنحن نرى مثلا أن غالبية اليهود عندما نسأل هل أنت أولا يهودي أو أنت إسرائيلي، ونحن نتكلم عن قضية ديمقراطية، نقول هذه دولة ديمقراطية، نرى أن الغالبية يقولون أنا يهودي أولا وإسرائيلي ثانيا، يعني أنه أصبحت حتى قضية الوطنية لم تعد القضية الأولى بين اليهود في إسرائيل. وبين ذلك في استطلاع بيو 49% نصف الإسرائيليين اليهود يقولون أنهم يفضلون طرد العرب من الداخل، ليس فقط من الأراضي في الفلسطينية المحتلة ولكن أيضا مواطنين في الداخل، نصف. هذا التغيير طبعا غير المعادلة السياسية في النظرة الإسرائيلية، فنرى أن فكرة استيعاب الضفة الغربية أصبحت خطيرة، ولذلك لا يريدون تصدير العلاقة الداخلية بين العرب واليهود إلى الضفة الغربية، ولكن استيراد العلاقة بين الفلسطينيين وإسرائيل في الضفة الغربية إلى الداخل الإسرائيلي بين العرب واليهود. يعني القضية هي معاكسة تماما بالنسبة للمساواة. هذا معنى القانون الجديد، قانون الوطنية. ولكن يجب أن نقول شيء نفهمه، أن غالبية اليهود في الولايات المتحدة يعارضون هذا القانون ويعارضون هذا التغيير، وهذا التغيير الذي حصل داخليا في إسرائيل على المستوى الديموغرافي نتج عنه فجوة هائلة بين موقف اليهود في الولايات المتحدة وموقف اليهود في الداخل، وهناك حاليا حزازات بعيدة الأمد يكتب عنها يوميا، ولا أعتقد أن هذا المشروع سينجح على المدى البعيد.
أشكرك. حاضر، حضرتك هناخد الكلمة، احنا بس ماشيين بالدور. الكلمة هتيجي لحضرتك. لا استأذن حضرتك، بس أنا ماشية بالدور، أنا كنت قلت للأستاذ في الأول. حضرتك الدور هيجي لحضرتك دقيقة واحدة، اتفضل. ممكن بس تحدد حضرتك تقول الاسم وتحدد السؤال لمين.
أنا محمد مجدي، أنا صحفي. كنت هوجه السؤال لدكتور شبلي سوري. بس كنت طبعا الوقت فيه علاقات يعني بدا ليها تحسن بين العرب والقادة العرب وإسرائيل، وفي زيارات متبادلة سواء بقى على المستوى الدبلوماسي الأقل يعني. هل ممكن نتوقع أنه بيكون في زيارة لقيادة عربية لإسرائيل مثلما فعل السادات من قبل؟ يعني ممكن نتوقع ده؟
سؤال لحضرتك.
والله لا أعرف. طبعا هناك تغيير في المعادلة السياسية، نحن نعرف على مستويات شخصية ومستويات استراتيجية. المعروف أن الدول العربية على الرغم من كل الكلام، وخاصة بالنسبة للقضية الفلسطينية، دائما كانت لها علاقات مع إسرائيل ولكن غير مكشوفة، وزيارات ومحادثات بين كثير من الزعماء العرب والزعماء الإسرائيليين، ويكتب عنها بشكل مستمر. القضية إذا كان هناك نية في اتخاذ زيارات تشابه ما قام به السادات، لا أعتقد لعدة أسباب. أنا لا أعتقد لعدة أسباب. على الرغم من أن هناك بعض التوافق الاستراتيجي وخاصة في الملف الإيراني بين بعض دول الخليج وإسرائيل، ليس هناك أي قضية رئيسية حاسمة بين إسرائيل والدول العربية الأخرى. يعني بالنسبة لمصر، مصر كان لها أراضي محتلة، كان ما تكسبه مصر من مثل هذه الزيارة هائل مقارنة بأي شيء يمكن أن تكسبه الدول العربية من زيارة لإسرائيل. فلا أعتقد أن ليس هناك أي شيء يعني ربما يكسبه الزعماء العرب من خلال مثل هذه المبادرة.
اوكي، اشكرك. اتفضل سؤال حضرتك. ودكتور بسمة كانت هتجاوب على سؤال تاني ما تردش عليه.
شكرا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أنا كمال شاهين، وكيل أول وزارة المالية السابق. الكلام عن التغير الديموغرافي في إسرائيل ليه 40 سنة ما حصلش ستيب تانية. يعني كيسنجر قال ناخد السلام على مراحل، لكن وقفت عند 40 سنة. وقفت لماذا؟ لأن الخطوة الثانية مطلوب من إسرائيل أنها تتنازل عن الأرض، وده يختلف عن الأهداف الاستراتيجية بتاعتها التوسع. فالخطوة الثانية مطالب إسرائيل أنها تتنازل عن الفكر بتاعها الاستراتيجي، وده مستحيل. وده واللي بيقولوا التوسع الديمقراطي والقانون القومية ده تكتيك إسرائيل بتعمله. تعمل قانون القومية ده تكتيك، لكن بتقول بمعنى آخر لن أتنازل عن الأراضي العربية. وشكرا.
أشكرك. أستاذ
فتحي عبد الغني، كاتب مسرحي وروائي، وأنا برجوكم أو بدعوكم نخرج شوية عن رقعة الشطرنج، لأننا اتضح في خلال 65 سنة السابقة منذ 48 اتضح أننا لا نجيد اللعب. ربما كان هناك وقت جيد مرة واحدة هي الفترة اللي لعب فيها السادات. واحنا لما بننظر لكامب ديفيد الحقيقة بننظر لها بمنظار بسيط جدا، بمعنى ان احنا ما بنحطش او ما بنستدعيش الظروف اللي كانت فيها مصر. مصر للأسف الشديد ضربت نفسها بسكينة في 67. وقيل من ناس للأسف يعني الواحد مش قادر يتكلم عنهم بسبب انهم كانوا قامات كبيرة جدا، انها مؤامرة الى اخره، لكن احنا شفنا نفسنا مصر بتضرب نفسها بسكينة في سنة 67. والسادات جه بعد كده بيعالج هذا الموقف البالغ الخطورة وبالغ التعقيد، وعاوز شغل بطريقة مختلفة، وشغل فيه إبداع سياسي يفوق الوصف. يعني أما الدكتور بهجت يقول إن هنري كيسنجر قال إن
السادات، أنا هستأذن حضرتك
هخلص
بس لو حضرتك تقدر تسأل السؤال.
حاضر. أما قال إن هو لو كان قال لنا مش عارف، ده راجل قاعد في مكتبه وما يعرفش المأساة اللي عايش فيها السادات. الحقيقة أنا عاوز أقول كلمتين فيما يختص بالخروج من لوحة الشطرنج. احنا قدامنا بلد اسمها إسرائيل، الشعب بتاعها عنده أسلحة هيدروجينية وأسلحة مش عارف إيه وإيه وإيه، ومع ذلك خايف. عنده أموال طائلة ومع ذلك بيشعر بالفقر. نيجي نقارن الشعب المصري هنجد إنه ما عندوش نفس الأسلحة ومع ذلك حاسس بالأمان. نيجي نشوف الحالة الاقتصادية نجد إنها يعني مش في المستوى حتى الطبيعي ومع ذلك عايش. نحن 100 مليون على حدود إسرائيل. لا يمكن أبدا إسرائيل، الخطر الوحيد اللي حس به إسرائيل هي من الشعب المصري. الشعب المصري مسؤوليته في نظري وفي تصوري، وده اللي فهمه السادات، هو السلام، ان هو يقوم بعملية السلام. هذه مسؤولية مصر، وده اللي انا بعالجه في مسرحيتي اللي حضرتكم ممكن تاخدوا صورة منها او نسخة منها على الباب.
بشكرك يا استاذ فتحي بعد اذنك.
اسمها رشيد احمد ورشيد.
شكرا يا استاذ
فتحي. شكرا جزيلا.
عماد بعد اذنك في سؤال هنا قدام. السؤال ده وسؤال اخير واحنا مضطرين ان احنا نقفل الجلسه.
مساء الخير، انا اسمي ناديه الدكروري من جريده الوطن وسعيده جدا بلقاء حضراتكم. سؤالي للدكتور شبلي، يعني على ما فهمته من كلام حضرتك ان لم يكن هناك خروج او باب خروج دون التوقيع على اتفاقيه كامب ديفيد. في راي حضرتك ما اي ضغوط ممارست على مصر للمضي قدما في التوقيع على هذه الاتفاقيه رغم ما ذكره الدكتور قرني بان هناك انتصار مصر حققته في هذه الحرب وهناك اوراق اخرى لم تستخدم بعد في هذه الاتفاقيه؟ شكرا.
دكتور شلبي اتفضل.
لم اسمع السؤال بشكل كامل. سالت يعني عن ايه الضغوط اللي كانت موجوده على مصر انه تقوم بعمليه كامب ديفيد؟
يعني الضغوط الممارسه على مصر للاصرار على المضي قدما في توقيع هذه الاتفاقيه رغم الخلافات التي حدثت ورغم ان مصر كانت منتصره خارجه منتصره من حرب ولم تستخدم هذه الورقه بشكل جيد.
طبعا ده سؤال افضل تساليه للدكتور نبيل وهو موجود هنا وبجاوبه احسن مني. انا اللي حكيت عنه ما كانش يعني ضغوط، هناك كان ضغوط داخليه طبعا الاقتصاد. نحن نعرف المظاهرات اللي كانت داخليا هنا بالنسبه لارتفاع اسعار الاسعار. كان هناك الضغوط الاستراتيجية كما قلت بالنسبة للميزانية المصرية العسكرية. أنت تعرف بعد حرب 73 الميزانية الحربية كانت نصف ميزانية الدولة، حتى يمكن 54 أو 55% من ميزانية الدولة. فكانت وطبعا عندك القضايا المتعلقة في الأراضي المحتلة وليس هناك حل حتى بعد 73. يعني حرب 73 كانت حرب ناجحة، يمكن أنجح حرب عربية كانت خلال القرن ربما، ومع ذلك لم ينتج عنها تحرير كل الأراضي، كان تحرير بعض الأراضي. فكان هناك ضغوط طبعا، تغيير المعادلة، التقدم. كما قلت ربما ونحن تحدثنا عن ذلك خلال اليومين الماضيين بالنسبة ربما تفهم أنور السادات أن المستقبل ليس مع الاتحاد السوفيتي. ربما كان يتوقع انهيار الاتحاد السوفيتي الذي حصل، وأن الولايات المتحدة ستكون الدولة المسيطرة والمهيمنة. فكانت هناك فرصة مفتوحة في خلال الحرب الباردة. فكانت هناك أشياء يعني ممكن التحدث عن هذا يحتاج إلى حوار وليس إلى مواقف حاسمة في هذا الموضوع، وأعتقد أن الدكتور نبيل أعلم مني في هذا الموضوع.
إذا كان يجب أن أقول شيء في هذا الموضوع فأنا أعتقد أنه أولا لا نستطيع أن نواجه الحقيقة أن حرب 73 كانت انتصرنا فيها، احنا انتصرنا في بدايتها انتصار عظيم، ثم حدثت أخطاء كثيرة جدا وثغرة وهذا الكلام يعني. فكان لابد أنه هو الرئيس السادات يفكر تفكير مختلف، وكان يرغب لا شك في انه يقوم بعمليه كبيره يبقى صلاح الدين بتاع العرب ويحرر كل الاراضي العربيه، لكن اسرائيل لم تكن سوف تترك له ذلك، وكان سوء اداره منه وسوء اداره من الجانب الامريكي ونجاح للجانب الاسرائيلي ما في شك في كامب ديفيد، لانه حقق انتصار انه قسم العرب وعمل مشاكل امام مصر وامام الدول العربيه وما عطاش حاجه خالص للفلسطينيين. فكان لا يجب ان يحصل ريهرسل قبلها وإعادة أوراق وإعادة نظر ووقت بعض الوقت للتفكير في كل هذه الأمور قبل أن ينتهي الاجتماع. يعني أنا كنت أفضل فعلا أن السادات يمشي قبل ما ينتهي ده ويتقرر، مش يمشي ويتقرر بعدها شهرين ثلاثة يحصل الاجتماع الآخر اللي يتم فيه كل شيء.
شكرا دكتور نبيل. دكتور بسمة كان في تعليق على
حريصة أجاوب على هذا السؤال اللي طرح لسبب معين، لأنه نهاية كلامي حتكون يعني عبرة من ما حصل اليوم. خلينا نستعيد الموقف الإيراني والخطاب الإيراني وتشكيل ميليشيا حزب الله في لبنان في 1982. ميليشيا حزب الله في لبنان هي عبارة عن دولة داخل الدولة، هي عبارة عن تجمع وتشكيل عسكري على حساب للتأثير ولتعطيل النظام السياسي اللبناني على حساب المكونات الأخرى اللبنانية. فإذا نحن عندنا استخدام الموضوع الإسرائيلي لمصلحة معينة لأمراء حرب هم قادة حزب الله وللتأثير وتغيير الحالة السياسية الداخلية اللبنانية. فنحن عايشين هاي الأزمة بشكل موضوعي واضح جدا. إيران بتتحدث عن إسرائيل أنه هي العدو الأكبر وبتعمل بعض المناوشات من خلال حزب الله، ولكنها تسعى إلى التمركز في دول عربية واحدة وبتلو الأخرى. وهذا اللي عم بيحصل بعد العراق دخلت سوريا، واليوم من سوريا حتى تطلع إيران عايزة تهديدات كل الدول وضغوطات الدول كلها. وبالتالي نحن أمام متاجرة بالخطر على إسرائيل. إيران تدعي أنها تهدد إسرائيل، وإسرائيل تدعي أن إيران تهددها. ليش؟ لأنه هذا بيجلب مساعدات أمريكية وبيعطيها حجة لعدم الانسحاب من الأراضي الفلسطينية وزي ما احنا شايفين. فنحن اليوم هذا العامل، نحن عارفين ما في سيناريو حرب مواجهة مع إيران بين إيران وإسرائيل، بجوز تروح تدمر منشآت نووية مش مهمة، هذا مش عم بيؤدي لحرب هذا، ولا رح ينفع لا الفلسطينية ولا المصالح العربية. فالحقيقة إنه نحن نزع هذه الحجة من إسرائيل، موضوع الأمني بتاع إسرائيل اللي في حقيقة باسمه العالم كله مضطر يستحمل اللي بيحصل، وهو حتى قانون انه لازم تبقى هويتنا معلنه انها يهوديه والا احنا مهددين وامننا مهدد. هذا ملوش نهايه، وايران والتشكيل الطائفي اللي بتقوم فيه بيمدد فقط فرصه لاسرائيل انها تستخدم هاي الحجه. شكرا.
شكرا دكتور بسمة. كان اخر سؤال وبعدين نقفل المناقشه.
حديثي للدكتور شبلي والسيد السفير الدكتور نبيل العربي. الدكتور بطرس غالي كان في بدايات المفاوضات يتحدث دائما عن نقطة غائبة في كل حديثنا، وهو نفاذ صبر المفاوض العربي أو عدم تدربه على اتساع صدره، وكما ذكر الدكتور نبيل العربي بأن الجانب الإسرائيلي كان في مفاوضاته دائما يطلب في كل طرح من جانب مصر في المفاوضات أن يعطوا بعض الوقت ثم تموت المطلب في هذا الشيء والاتجاه. وبالتالي هنا لا عتاب على ان كامب ديفيد لم يكن معد لها جيدا من وجهة نظري، وانما هي كانت اسلوب التفاوض من الجانبين والبراعه من الجانب الاسرائيلي والمسنود طبعا من الجانب الامريكي في مفاوضاته في مقابل الجانب العربي الرئيس السادات او طاقم المفاوض رفيع المستوى. يجب ان نقر بهذا فيما وصلنا اليه. الدليل على ذلك ان بنفس السيناريو فشلت ايضا مفاوضات كامب ديفيد الثانيه التي كان يرعاها الرئيس كلينتون مع طرفي الرئيس ياسر عرفات في فلسطين والرئيس الوزراء يهود باراك في نفس الوقت. فكل ما اود ان اقوله ان المساله كلها تتعلق بتدريب في المرحله القادمه اذا اردنا ان ندخل في مفاوضات من اي نوع مجموعه من المفاوضين البارعين طويلي الصبر حتى يحصلوا على ما يريدون، وكما تفضل الدكتور نبيل ان تعطى مهله ليست على مائده واحده وعلى في وقت واحد تتم كل الاجراءات، لانها تحتاج الى مشاورات مع الاطراف ثم العوده الى المفاوضات.
أشكر حضرتك. تمام. I think it was...
في كتابي عن المفاوضات تحدثت عن تأثير طاقم المفاوضات وخاصة من خلال الدول الديمقراطية والدول الغير ديمقراطية. وكان ملاحظ طبعا كما قال الدكتور نبيل وآخرين منهم بطرس غالي وحتى أسامة الباز. الرئيس السادات كان يتخذ القرارات شخصيا. كان هناك خبراء مصريين لهم خبرة في المفاوضات ويعرفون القضايا، ووزارة الخارجية كانت تتابع هذه القضايا خاصة بالنسبة للملف الفلسطيني. الرئيس السادات كان طبعا ينظر إلى الغابة وليس إلى الشجر، كذا واضح، هذا معروف عنه أنه لا يهتم كان في هذه القضايا ولا يريد أن تؤثر هذه الأشياء التي اعتبرها صغيرة على قراراته الكبيرة، وربما أثر ذلك على أسلوب المفاوضات. نلاحظ مثلا أن المفاوضات عندما كان كارتر يتحدث مع الإسرائيليين كان لا يتحدث مع بيغن مباشرة، كان يتحدث مع من تحت بيغن بشكل مباشر، وإن كان ديان أو إن كان وايزمان أو آخرين يتفاوض معهم مباشرة، ومنهم طبعا الطاقم الأمريكي الموجود معه. ولكن كان كارتر شخصيا لا يتفاوض مع بيغن إلا في بعض الحالات، ولكن عندما يتفاوض كارتر كان يتفاوض مع أنور السادات مباشرة وليس مع نبيل العربي أو آخرين. فكان هناك طبعا بعض التغيير في المعادلة، ربما هذا أثر على القضايا. ولكن أنا شخصيا كمحلل أنظر إلى القضايا من ناحية تاريخية. في بعض الأحيان لا شك أن أنور السادات صادق في بعض المواضيع، معنى ذلك ربما هناك مثلا إذا كان الانسحاب أو عدم انسحاب من توقيته يختلف مثلا من 5 أسابيع ل 10 أسابيع لسنة، بالنسبة في سيناء إلى آخر لحظة، ولذلك كان التركيز على قضايا ما يمكن أن تعتبر جانبية، معنى ذلك أنها كانت مأخوذة ربما يعني الكل متأكد أنها ستحصل، وكان التأجيل لقضايا المفاوضات عن الاستيطان الإسرائيلي في الضفة الغربية وغزة. فهناك بعض الفشل بدون شك في أسلوب المفاوضات، ليس الخبرة. أنا حسب رأيي ونحن ربما الدكتور نبيل، طبعا أنا أتحدث والدكتور نبيل موجود، الدكتور نبيل كما قال عندما يحضر وزارة الخارجية الاتفاقيات والقرارات وتعطي رأيها، طبعا الرئيس هو الذي يتخذ رأي في هذا الموضوع، يعني كان الرئيس يأخذ الرأي الحاسم، وكان أسهل مثلا على ليس فقط على الرئيس كارتر ولكن على المفاوضين الإسرائيليين طبعا أن يتفاوضوا مباشرة مع السادات، يعرفون أنه أسهل الحصول على الجواب المباشر والحاسم من أنور السادات، وبعد ذلك لا يمكن
أشكرك دكتور شلبي. بشكر الحضور على أسئلتهم والمتحدثين. تفضل يا دكتور.
الغداء ينتظر، احنا متأخرين حوالي 10 دقايق. طبعا قبل ما ننفض نقطة أساسية، الدكتور شيبلي والدكتور ويليام كوانت هيتكلموا بكرة في التجمع عن سياسة ترامب الخارجية، فمن 11:30 ل 12:15. دي فلو عاوزين تتابعوا الموضوع ممكن. نمرة 2، دي كانت جلسة طويلة جدا، 3 ساعات تقريبا وبالعربية في الجامعة الأمريكية. أنا مبسوط إن إحنا عملنا تقليد جديد، إن إحنا اللغة العربية تبقى جزء من عملنا في الجامعة الأمريكية بقدر الإمكان. فأحب أشكر زملائي شكرا جزيلا، وأتمنى إن إحنا نستمر في هذا التحليل الجدي باللغة العربية. شكرا لكم. ناخد صورة مع بعض.